Sienna Mercer, was labeled a waste of space. When Liam Carter rejected her before the Onyx Ridge Pack, he thought he was ending her life. Instead, he ignited her legend. Banished into a blizzard that killed warriors. Sienna didn't find death. She found a cave. Inside lurked 12 dying monsters bleeding in the dark. Faced with freezing or healing beasts that could tear her apart, she chose to stay. She didn't realize that saving them meant saving the continent's king. By morning, that rejection became Liam's fatal mistake, and the weak Omega would rise as the Alpha King's true Luna. The silence in the great hall of the Onyx Ridge Pack was louder than the screaming wind outside. It was the kind of silence that suffocated you. Sienna Mercer stood in the center of the polished mahogany floor, her hands trembling inside the pockets of her worn grey cardigan. She could feel the eyes of 300 pack members boring into her. They were waiting. They were hungry for the spectacle. Trion, on the dais, standing 6'4" with shoulders that strained against his cashmere sweater, was Liam Carter, the future Alpha of Onyx Ridge. The man Sienna had loved since they were children scraping knees in the forest. The man who just yesterday had whispered that everything would change once he took the title. He was right. Everything did change. Sienna Mercer. Liam's voice boomed, artificially amplified by the acoustics of the hall. He didn't look at her eyes. He looked above her head, staring at the back wall. That was the first knife in her heart. The moon goddess makes mistakes, rare ones, but mistakes nonetheless. A ripple of gasps went through the crowd. Our pack requires strength. Liam continued, his jaw tightening. We require a Luna who can bear warriors whose lineage is pure, whose wolf is fierce. You have no wolf, Sienna. You are barely more than human. You are a liability. Sienna felt the air leave her lungs. No wolf. It was the curse of her life. She was 22, and her wolf had never surfaced. She was an Omega in the truest, cruelest sense at the bottom of the food chain, useful only for scrubbing floors and mending uniforms. I, Liam Carter, Alpha Apparent of the Onyx Ridge Pack, reject you, Sienna Mercer, as my fated mate. The invisible bond between them, the thin golden thread Sienna had felt tugging at her soul since she turned 18, snapped. The physical pain was immediate, like a whip cracking across her chest. She gasped, doubling over, clutching her heart. Liam didn't flinch. And, he added, delivering the killing blow because a rejected mate causes instability in the pack leadership. I hereby banish you from Onyx Ridge territory. You have 1 hour to clear the perimeter. Liam, please, Sienna whispered, her voice cracking. It's a blizzard out there. The weatherman said it's a historic freeze. You're sentencing me to death. Then die quickly. A sharp female voice cut in. Sienna looked up to see Beatrice Vaughn stepping out from the shadows behind Liam. Beatrice was stunning lethal and the daughter of the Beta. She slid her arm through Liam's, resting her head on his shoulder. Weakness is a disease, Sienna. We're just cutting out the infection. Liam looked down at Beatrice, and for a split second, Sienna saw regret in his eyes. But it vanished, replaced by the cold steel of ambition. He turned his back on Sienna. Get her out, Liam commanded. 2 enforcers grabbed Sienna by the arms. She didn't fight. There was no point. As they dragged her toward the heavy oak doors, she caught the eye of her own father in the crowd. He looked away, focusing on his shoes. That hurt more than the rejection. They threw her out the back gates, tossing her meager duffel bag into the snow after her. The metal gates slammed shut with a finality that echoed in her bones. Sienna stood up, brushing the ice from her jeans. The cold was instant, biting through her thin coat. The wind howled like a dying animal. She looked back at the warm, glowing windows of the pack house, the only home she had ever known. Fine. She spat into the wind, wiping a hot tear that instantly froze on her cheek. If I'm going to die, I'll die on my own terms, not yours. She turned toward the whispering peaks. The mountains were forbidden. They were treacherous. Legend said the spirits of the old wars haunted the caves, but the forest was too open, and the patrols would catch her if she lingered. Her only chance of survival was the deep caverns in the upper ridges, places even the wolves feared to tread. Sienna began to walk. Every step was a battle. The snow was knee-deep and rising. Her extremities began to go numb within 20 minutes. She wasn't a warrior. She wasn't a hunter. But Sienna had a secret that the pack ignored because they were too obsessed with physical strength. She was a savant with herbs. She knew every plant, every root, and every poison in these woods. She knew that if she could find the sulfur caves, the geothermal heat would save her. She marched for 3 hours. The world turned white. Her eyelashes froze together. Her heart rate soared, the seductive lethargy of hypothermia creeping in. Just lay down, a voice in her head whispered. It will be warm soon. No, she gritted out, forcing one foot in front of the other. Just as her knees gave out, she saw it. A fissure in the rock face hidden behind a curtain of frozen ivy. A cave mouth. She crawled down toward it, dragging her numb legs. She pushed through the frozen vines and collapsed onto the stone floor of the cavern. It was dry. It was out of the wind. But it wasn't empty. The smell hit her first, coppery metallic and overwhelming. The smell of fresh blood. Sienna blinked, her vision adjusting to the gloom. Deep in the cavern, eyes began to glow. Yellow, amber, red. A low growl vibrated through the floor, shaking her frozen body. She wasn't alone. And she had just crawled into the den of something far more dangerous than the storm. Sienna froze. Every instinct screamed at her to run back into the snow, but her legs refused to obey. She scrambled backward, her back hitting the cold rock wall. As her eyes adjusted to the dim light filtering through the snow-covered entrance, the shapes became clear. Wolves. Massive ones. They weren't normal timber wolves, nor were they typical shifters. These beasts were gigantic, their shoulders broad enough to block doorways. 1, 2, 5. She counted 12 of them. They were scattered across the cavern floor like discarded toys. And they were being slaughtered. Oh God, Sienna whispered, her hand covering her mouth. The growling wasn't aggression. It was pain. The cavern looked like a battlefield. The wolves were bleeding profusely. Deep lacerations tore through their fur claw marks, but also distinct jagged wounds that looked like they came from silver-laced blades. The closest wolf, a russet-colored male the size of a pony, wheezed pink froth bubbling at his muzzle. He tried to lift his head to snap at her, but collapsed, too weak to move. Sienna's fear began to morph into something else. It was the clinical detachment she felt whenever she worked in the pack hospital. She saw the wound on the russet wolf's flank. The blood was dark, almost black. Aconite. Wolfsbane. And not just the natural plant, this was a concentrated extract used by hunters. You're all dying, she said softly. A low, thunderous rumble came from the back of the cave. Sienna looked up. Resting on a raised stone ledge separated from the others, lay the largest wolf she had ever seen. His fur was pitch black, darker than the shadows around him. Even lying down, he was terrifying. His eyes were a piercing electric blue, and they were locked on her with an intensity that made her soul shiver. He was the alpha. There was no doubt. He tried to stand his front legs trembling, baring teeth that were the length of daggers. He was protecting the others, even while he was bleeding out from a gash across his chest. Sienna held up her hands, palms open. "I'm not going to hurt you," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "I can smell the poison. It's aconite mixed with silver nitrate. If you don't neutralize it, you'll all be dead by sunrise." The black wolf snarled a sound like grinding rocks. He didn't trust her. Why should he? She smelled like an omega from a rival territory. Sienna reached into her frozen duffel bag. Her fingers were stiff, but she managed to undo the clasp. She pulled out a bundle of dried herbs wrapped in twine and a small glass jar of a thick green paste. "I was the herbalist for Onyx Ridge," she said, stepping forward, "before they threw me out today." The black wolf's ears twitched. He watched her approach the russet wolf. "Don't kill me," she whispered to the black alpha, maintaining eye contact. "Please, I just want to help." She knelt beside the russet wolf. The beast flinched, a whimper escaping its throat. "Shh." Sienna cooed, her hands moving automatically now. "I know. It burns." She worked quickly. She didn't have fresh supplies, but she had her emergency kit. She crushed dried St. John's wort and milk thistle into the green paste, a mixture of clay and aloe she kept for burns. It wasn't a cure, but the clay would draw out the toxins, and the herbs would slow the heart rate to prevent the poison from pumping through the system too fast. She slathered the paste directly into the open wound. The wolf howled a sound of pure agony and snapped his jaws inches from her face. Sienna didn't flinch. "Hold still," she commanded, using her nurse voice. "You big baby, hold still, or the poison kills you." The wolf, stunned by her tone, froze. The paste began to hiss as it contacted the silver residue. Sienna moved to the next wolf, a grey female with a crushed leg, then a white male with a slash across his eye. She worked for hours. The adrenaline kept the cold at bay. She tore strips from her own clothing, her scarf, the hem of her cardigan, to bind the wounds. She was covered in blood, her hands stained red and green. She moved among them like a ghost, a small, fragile human walking through a graveyard of monsters. Finally, only one remained. The black wolf. He hadn't taken his eyes off her for a second. He was in the worst shape of them all. The gash on his chest was deep, exposing the rib. He had lost a lot of blood. Sienna approached the ledge. The air around him felt heavy, charged with static electricity. This wasn't just a wolf. The power radiating off him was suffocating. It was alpha power, but magnified by 10. She climbed onto the ledge. He was massive. His head alone was the size of her torso. "You're the stubborn one, aren't you?" Sienna murmured, kneeling before him, "watching me work while you bleed out." The wolf growled, but it was weak. His blue eyes were glazing over. "You need stitches," she said, examining the chest wound. "I have a needle and thread, but no anesthesia. This is going to hurt like hell." The wolf looked at her. Slowly, deliberately, he lowered his massive head onto his paws. It was a gesture of submission, or perhaps permission. Sienna threaded the needle. Her hands were shaking again, exhaustion catching up to her. "Okay. Stay with me, big guy. Don't you dare die on me. I didn't get rejected and walk through a blizzard just to watch you quit." She pierced the skin. The wolf's body went rigid, his muscles bunching like steel cables under the fur, but he didn't make a sound. As she worked, sewing the flesh of this terrifying creature, Sienna felt a strange sensation, a warmth. It started in her fingertips where she touched him and spread up her arms. It wasn't just body heat. It felt like a connection. It felt like the static she used to feel with Liam, but deeper, ancient. She shook her head. Hypothermia, she told herself. I'm hallucinating. She tied off the last stitch and applied the last of her poultice. She collapsed back against the cave wall, wiping sweat and blood from her forehead. Done, she whispered. That's all I can do. She looked around. 12 wolves, all bandaged, all breathing. The adrenaline crashed. The cold of the cave rushed back in. Sienna pulled her knees to her chest, shivering violently. Her coat was ruined, her scarf used as bandages. She closed her eyes, her teeth chattering. At least, I didn't die. Alone. She felt a movement, heat, immense radiating heat. She opened her eyes. The black wolf had dragged himself closer. He curled his massive body around her, creating a wall of fur and muscle between her and the cold air. Then the russet wolf moved, pressing against her other side. One by one, the ones who could move huddled closer. They were creating a puppy pile, a heater. Sienna was buried in the fur of the deadliest predators in the forest. The black wolf rested his heavy head on her lap. His breathing was steady now. Sienna buried her hands in his thick black mane. For the first time in her life, amidst the blood and the snow and the rejection, she felt safe. She drifted into sleep, unaware that the beast using her lap as a pillow was Gabriel Sterling, the Alpha King of the 7 regions, and she had just ordered him to hold still. Morning was coming, and with it a reckoning. Sienna woke up to the smell of rain and cedarwood. It was a rich, masculine scent that seemed to permeate her very pores. She was warm, hot, actually. A heavy weight was draped over her waist, pinning her down. She buried her face deeper into the pillow. It was hard, but warm, and it was moving, rising and falling rhythmically. Wait. Pillows don't breathe. Memory crashed into her like a freight train. The banishment, the blizzard, the cave, the 12 wolves. Sienna's eyes snapped open. She wasn't looking at a pillow. She was looking at a chest. A tanned, muscular, very human chest, covered in faint scars and a light dusting of dark hair. Her hand was splayed wide, right over the man's heart, feeling the slow, powerful thud beneath the skin. She froze her breath, hitching in her throat. Slowly terrified of what she would find, she lifted her gaze. The black wolf was gone. In his place lay a man who looked like he had been carved out of granite by a very angry god. He had a strong jawline covered in a day's worth of stubble, a straight nose and black hair that fell messily over his forehead. He was also stark naked, and he was watching her. Those electric blue eyes were open, clear, and amused. "You drool when you sleep," he rumbled. His voice was deep, a baritone that vibrated through her chest, given that she was practically lying on top of him. Sienna shrieked. It wasn't a dignified sound. It was a high-pitched yelp of pure panic. She scrambled backward, flailing her limbs, trying to untangle herself from the man. "Easy," the man said, sitting up effortlessly. He winced slightly as the movement pulled at the stitches on his chest, but otherwise he seemed unbothered by his nudity. Sienna's back hit the cold cave wall again. She pulled her knees up, covering her eyes with her hands. "Oh my God. Oh my God. You're people." "Usually," a different voice laughed. Sienna peeked through her fingers. The cave was full of naked men, 12 of them. They were stretching, checking their wounds, flexing stiff limbs. The russet wolf she had treated first was now a younger man, with copper hair and a boyish face, though his body was built like a linebacker. He was inspecting the green paste on his flank. "This stuff itches," the copper-haired man complained, picking at the dried clay. "Don't touch it," Sienna snapped instinctively, her healer's brain overriding her embarrassment. "It's drawing out the silver nitrate. If you pick it off, the toxin goes back into your bloodstream." The man froze his hand, hovering over the wound. He looked at the black-haired man, the leader, for confirmation. The leader stood up. He was tall, easily 6'5", towering over everyone else in the cave. The air shifted around him, that same suffocating pressure Sienna had felt from the wolf. The other men immediately stopped what they were doing and lowered their heads slightly. He walked toward Sienna. She pressed herself harder against the rock, wishing she could phase through it. He stopped 2 feet away, looming over her. He didn't cover himself. He didn't seem to care. He simply stared at her, with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Who are you?" he asked. It wasn't a question. It was a command. "Sienna," she squeaked. Then, clearing her throat, she tried to find a shred of dignity. "Sienna Mercer." "Mercer," he repeated, tasting the name. "From Onyx Ridge," Sienna nodded. "Yes." "I know Alpha Carter," the man said, his eyes narrowing. "Why is a Mercer girl alone in a forbidden cave in the middle of a blizzard? Where is your pack? Where is your mate?" Sienna looked down at her hands. The shame was still fresh, a raw wound that hurt more than the cold. "I don't have a pack anymore, and I don't have a mate." The man went silent. The tension in the cave spiked. "Explain," he demanded. "I was rejected," Sienna whispered. "Yesterday. By the future Alpha. He said I was weak. He said I had no wolf. So he banished me." A low murmur went through the other men. Rejection was rare. Banishment of a pack member without a crime was almost unheard of. To do it in winter was a death sentence. The leader crouched down so he was eye level with her. For the first time, she saw the dangerous intelligence in those blue eyes. "He banished you for being weak." "Yes." The man let out a short, dark laugh. He gestured to his chest where Sienna's neat black stitches held his skin together. Then he gestured to the 11 warriors behind him, all alive, all breathing. "You walked into a den of feral poisoned wolves," he said quietly. "You neutralized a hunter's poison that kills alphas in hours. You stitched me up without flinching while I was in my shift. And you kept 12 of the King's elite alive through the night, using nothing but mud and your body heat." Sienna blinked. "The King's elite?" The man smirked. It was a terrifying, handsome expression. "I am Gabriel Sterling," he said, "Alpha King of the 7 regions, and these monsters you saved are my personal guard." Sienna's blood ran cold. She hadn't just saved a pack. She had saved the Royal Guard, and the man she had been cuddling, the man she had ordered to hold still, was the most powerful, ruthless warlord in werewolf history. She did the only thing that felt appropriate. She fainted. "Wake her up." "I'm trying, Your Majesty. She's exhausted, and I think the shock was a bit much. She saved us Elias. Fix her." Sienna came to slowly. Someone was holding a pungent salt vial under her nose. She coughed, swatting the hand away, and sat up. She was still in the cave, but someone had draped a heavy, fur-lined cloak over her. It smelled like Gabriel. She looked around. The men were dressed now, thank the moon goddess. They had retrieved waterproof packs from a hidden crevice in the back of the cave. They wore tactical gear, black cargo pants, combat boots, and fitted thermal shirts. They looked less like wolves now, and more like a paramilitary strike team. Gabriel was standing by the cave entrance, looking out at the snow. He turned as she sat up. He was wearing a black tactical shirt, that clung to his frame, the bandage on his chest visible underneath. "Good, you're back," Gabriel said. He walked over, handing her a canteen. "Drink. It's water with electrolytes." Sienna took it, her hands trembling. "I'm sorry, Your Majesty. I didn't know." "Stop," Gabriel cut her off. He sat on a rock opposite her. "You don't bow to me. Not after last night." A man with glasses and a kind face stepped forward. It was the one who had held the smelling salts. "I'm Elias," he said softly. "The royal physician. I wanted to thank you, Sienna. The mixture you used, St. John's wort and bentonite clay." Sienna nodded. "And some crushed willow bark for the pain." Elias shook his head in disbelief. "Old world medicine. I haven't seen anyone use that in decades. We rely so much on fast healing that we forgot how to treat poisons that stop the healing. You bought us the time we needed to purge the toxin. You saved the king's life." "I was just trying not to get eaten," Sienna admitted. Gabriel's eyes softened just a fraction. "You have no wolf." "No," Sienna said, looking down. "I never shifted. That's why that's why they threw me out. I'm just a human to them, a liability." Gabriel looked at Elias. The doctor adjusted his glasses. "It's curious, Your Majesty. She has no wolf scent. In fact, she has almost no scent at all. It's like a void. That might be why the wolves didn't attack her immediately last night. They didn't register her as a threat or prey. She smelled like nothing. Like snow." Gabriel leaned forward. "A liability," he repeated, testing the word. "Alpha Carter is a fool. He sees a woman who can't shift and thou throws her away. I see a woman who can walk past enemy patrols undetected. Because she has no scent. I see a healer who stays calm when an alpha wolf is snapping in her face." He stood up, extending a hand to her. Sienna looked at the hand. It was large, calloused, a warrior's hand. "Get up, Sienna," Gabriel commanded. She hesitated. "Where are we going?" "The blizzard is breaking," Gabriel said, glancing at the entrance. "We were ambushed by rogue hunters 3 days ago. They used tech we haven't seen before. We need to get back to the royal stronghold to regroup. You're coming with us." "I can't," Sienna said, shrinking back. "I'm banished. If I go with you, I have nowhere to go. I'm a rogue now." "You aren't a rogue," Gabriel growled, his voice dropping an octave, causing the other men to stiffen. "You are under my protection." "Why?" Sienna asked, her voice small. "Because I stitched you up." Gabriel looked at her, his blue eyes burning with a strange intensity. He couldn't tell her the truth that the moment he woke up and saw her face, his wolf, which had been silent and sullen for years, had slammed against his ribcage and roared, "Mine!" He couldn't tell her that he had felt the spark when she touched him, a spark he thought he was too old and too damaged to ever feel. "Because," Gabriel said simply, "I owe you a life debt, and the House of Sterling always pays its debts." He didn't wait for her to argue. He reached down, grabbed her hand, and pulled her to her feet. The electricity zapped her again, shooting up her arm. She gasped. Gabriel felt it too. His pupils dilated. He held her hand a second longer than necessary, his thumb brushing over her pulse point. "Pack up," Gabriel barked to his men, breaking the moment. "We move in 5. Jax take point. Elias keep an eye on Sienna." "Yes, Alpha," the men chorused. Sienna stood there, her hand still tingling. She watched Gabriel strap a knife to his thigh. He moved with a lethal grace that was mesmerizing. She was an outcast, a reject. Yesterday she was ready to die in the snow. Today she was marching to war with the Alpha King. As they stepped out of the cave and into the blinding white snow, Gabriel paused. He took off his heavy, fur-lined cloak and draped it around Sienna's shoulders. It engulfed her, weighing her down with warmth and his scent. "Stay close to me," he murmured near her ear. "The woods aren't safe, and I don't want to lose my new healer." Sienna looked up at him. "I'm not your healer, Your Majesty." Gabriel smirked, looking forward into the trees. "We'll see." They began the descent, but they hadn't gone a mile before a howl ripped through the air. It wasn't a wild wolf. It was a patrol howl. Sienna froze. She knew that howl. "It's Onyx Ridge," she whispered. "They're tracking me." Gabriel stopped. His face hardened into a mask of cold fury. "Tracking you? After they banished you?" They like to make sure," Sienna said, trembling. "Beatrice. She enjoys the hunt." Gabriel turned to his men. The 12 warriors, despite their injuries, shifted into formation instantly. They were a wall of death, and Gabriel was the spearhead. "Let them come," Gabriel said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "I think it's time I had a word with your former Alpha." The forest was silent, save for the crunch of 24 boots on the frozen crust of the snow. Gabriel kept Sienna tucked into his side, his arm heavy and protective around her shoulders. The heat radiating from him was the only thing keeping her shivering at bay. Then the trees broke. Ahead of them, blocking the narrow logging road that led back to civilization, stood massive wolves and 2 humans in winter gear. It was the Onyx Ridge Patrol. At the center stood Liam Carter. Next to him, looking smug in a white fur coat that cost more than Sienna's entire life earnings, was Beatrice Vaughan. Beatrice laughed, the sound sharp and brittle in the cold air. "Well, well, look who didn't freeze." Liam stepped forward, his eyes scanning the group of men surrounding Sienna. He didn't recognize them immediately. Gabriel and his elite were wearing tactical gear, without insignias, their faces grim and shadowed by hoods. To Liam, they looked like mercenaries or rogues. "Sienna," Liam said, his voice dripping with condescension. "I banished you. That means you leave the territory. It doesn't mean you go find a pack of stray dogs to protect you." The elite stiffened. Hands drifted to holsters and knives. Gabriel didn't move. He didn't even look at Liam. He looked down at Sienna. "Is this him?" he asked quietly. Sienna nodded, unable to speak. The shame of being seen like this, dirty, bloody, wearing a man's oversized coat, burned her cheeks. "He called us stray dogs," Jax, the copper-haired warrior, muttered with a dark chuckle. "That's a new one." Beatrice sneered. "Hand her over. She's technically trespassing now. We have the right tool to execute her on sight." "Execute," Sienna gasped. "Beatrice, I was leaving. I just got caught in the storm." "You're a stain on our pack, Sienna." Beatrice spat. "And stains need to be scrubbed out." She raised her hand, signaling the 3 wolves behind her to attack. The wolves lunged. It happened in a blur. Sienna flinched, expecting teeth and pain. Instead, she felt a gust of wind. Gabriel moved. He didn't shift. He didn't need to. He caught the first wolf, a grey beast weighing easily 200 pounds by the throat, in mid-air. With a roar that shook the snow from the trees, Gabriel slammed the wolf into the frozen ground. The crack of bone was sickeningly loud. The other 2 wolves skidded to a halt, whining in terror. The aura rolling off Gabriel wasn't just dominance. It was absolute, crushing power. It forced the Onyx Ridge wolves to their bellies instantly. Liam and Beatrice stumbled back, the color draining from their faces. Gabriel straightened up, dusting off his hands. He stepped over the whimpering wolf and walked toward Liam. As he moved, he pulled back his hood. Liam's eyes widened. He recognized the face now. Everyone did. It was the face on the currency, the face on the statues in the capital. "Alpha King Sterling," Liam whispered, his knees buckling. He dropped to the ground, head bowed. "Your Majesty. We didn't know." Beatrice looked like she was going to be sick. She fell to her knees beside Liam. "You called my royal guard stray dogs," Gabriel said, his voice deceptively soft. He stopped inches from Liam's nose. "And you threatened to execute a woman under my personal protection." "We thought she was a rogue, Your Majesty," Liam stammered, sweating despite the freezing cold. "She is an Omega defective. She has no wolf. We were just—" "Defective," Gabriel interrupted. He laughed a cold, terrifying sound. He turned back to Sienna, extending his hand. Sienna walked forward, her legs shaking, and took his hand. He pulled her close, wrapping his arm around her waist in a possessive claim that shocked the entire clearing. "This woman," Gabriel announced, his voice booming like thunder, "saved the lives of 12 of my best men last night. She walked into a cave of death and pulled us back. She has more courage in her little finger than your entire pack possesses." He looked at Beatrice, his blue eyes turning to ice. "You say she has no wolf. I say she doesn't need one. She has me." Liam looked up, shock and jealousy warring on his face. He saw the way the king held Sienna. He saw the way Sienna leaned into him. "She is coming with me," Gabriel declared, "and if I hear that anyone from Onyx Ridge has so much as whispered her name in disrespect, I will return, and I won't be as polite next time." Gabriel turned his back on them. "Let's go." As they walked past the kneeling figures of her former tormentors, Sienna couldn't resist. She stopped. She looked down at Liam, who was staring at the snow, humiliated. "Goodbye, Liam," she whispered. "I hope she was worth it." Liam looked up, his eyes full of sudden, crushing regret. But it was too late. Sienna turned and walked away, disappearing into the forest, surrounded by a wall of kings. The extraction team met them 3 miles down the road, black SUVs with tinted windows and royal flags on the hoods. Sienna had never been in a car this nice. The leather seats were heated. She fell asleep instantly, her head resting against the cool glass. When she woke, it was night. The convoy was passing through massive iron gates. "Welcome home, Your Majesty," the driver said. Sienna sat up, rubbing her eyes. They weren't at a house. They were at a fortress. The Sterling estate was a sprawling modern castle built into the side of a mountain, overlooking the glittering lights of the capital city Aurelia. "It's big," Sienna mumbled. Gabriel, sitting beside her, chuckled. He had been working on a tablet the whole ride, but he put it away as she woke. "It's a bit much," he admitted, "but it has good security." The car stopped, the door opened. Sienna stepped out and immediately felt out of place. Her jeans were torn, her boots were muddy, and she was still wearing the king's blood-stained coat. A line of staff stood waiting, maids in crisp uniforms, butlers in suits. An older man with silver hair and a stern face stepped forward. "Your Majesty, we were worried when communications went dark. It was a trap, Silas," Gabriel said, his face grim. "We'll debrief in the war room in an hour, but first, this is Sienna Mercer." Silas looked at Sienna. His gaze was critical, scanning her from head to toe. He saw the dirt, the blood, the poverty. But then he saw the king's cloak around her shoulders. His eyebrows shot up. "Ms. Mercer." Silas bowed slightly. "Welcome to the Sterling estate." "Silas, get her a suite in the East Wing," Gabriel ordered. "Get her a hot meal, a bath, and whatever clothes she needs. Burn what she's wearing." "Wait," Sienna said, clutching the coat. "Your coat." Gabriel looked at her. For a moment, the stern king vanished, replaced by the man from the cave. "Keep it," he said softly. "It looks better on you." He turned and strode away, flanked by his guards. Sienna watched him go, feeling a sudden pang of loss. "This way, miss," a young maid said kindly. The next 2 hours were a blur. Sienna was scrubbed, polished, and fed. She ate soup that tasted like heaven, and bread that was still warm. The bath was the size of a swimming pool. When she finally emerged, she was wearing a silk robe that cost more than her father's car. She stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling mirror in her suite. Her skin was pink and clean, her brown hair falling in soft waves around her shoulders. She looked pretty, for the first time in years. There was a knock on the door. "Come in," she said. The door opened, and Gabriel walked in. He had showered, too. He was wearing fresh clothes, dark jeans, and a black sweater. He looked less like a soldier, and more like a predator at rest. "You clean up well," he said, leaning against the doorframe. Sienna flushed. "Thank you. For everything. You didn't have to bring me here. You could have just dropped me off in the city." "I told you," Gabriel said, walking into the room. The air pressure shifted again. He was so big in this space. "I pay my debts." He stopped in front of her. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small glass vial. Sienna recognized it immediately. "My poultice." "The lab boys analyzed it," Gabriel said. "They said the chemical composition is genius. You combined a coagulant with a toxin binder. Where did you learn that?" "My grandmother," Sienna said. "She was the pack healer before she died. She taught me everything. The old ways." Gabriel nodded slowly. "The old ways are forgotten. We rely on our wolf healing too much. That's why the hunter's poison was so effective. It shut down our wolves, and we didn't know how to function as humans." He took a step closer. The scent of cedarwood was overwhelming. "Sienna," he said, his voice dropping. "The ambush, it wasn't random. Someone knew our route. Someone knew exactly how to kill us." Sienna's eyes widened. "A traitor, yes," Gabriel said. "And the poison, it smelled familiar to me. But I can't place it." He held up the vial of green pacid. "You smelled it. In the cave. You identified it instantly." "It was aconite and silver nitrate," Sienna said. "But there was something else. A binding agent." "What was it?" Gabriel asked, intense focus in his eyes. "Orchids," Sienna whispered. "Black orchids. It has a very faint, sweet smell underneath the metallic scent." Gabriel went still. His face turned pale, then furious. "Black orchids?" "Yes, they only grow in one place that I know of," Sienna said. "The greenhouse of the Southern Alpha. Alpha Thorn." Gabriel turned away, pacing the room. "Thorn! My cousin!" He slammed his fist onto the dresser, making Sienna jump. "He wants the throne." He turned back to her, his eyes blazing. "You just gave me the key to the conspiracy, Sienna. You are more valuable than my entire intelligence network." He looked at her, then really looked at her. She wasn't just a savior. She was the key to his survival. And she was standing there in a silk robe, looking vulnerable and beautiful and smelling like rain. He closed the distance between them. He reached out his hand, cupping her cheek. His thumb brushed her lower lip. "Why do you have no scent?" he whispered half to himself. "Why can't I smell you? I don't know." Sienna breathed, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I'm defective." "No," Gabriel growled softly. He leaned down, his forehead resting against hers. "You're perfect. You're the only thing I can't read, and it's driving me insane." The air crackled. He was going to kiss her. Sienna knew it. She wanted it. But then the door burst open. "Gabriel." We have a problem." It was Jax. He froze in the doorway, seeing the King and the Omega intimately close. Gabriel pulled back, a low growl of frustration rumbling in his chest. He turned to Jax, his face a mask of stone. "This better be good, Jax." "It's the Council," Jax said, looking breathless. "They know about the girl. They know you brought an unsanctioned, wolfless Omega into the royal quarters. They're demanding she be removed. Tonight." Gabriel's eyes went black. "Let them come," Gabriel snarled. "If they want her, they'll have to go through me." He looked back at Sienna. "Stay here. Lock the door." He stormed out, leaving Sienna alone in the golden cage. She touched her cheek where his hand had been. She was safe from the snow. She was safe from Liam. But now she was in the center of a Game of Thrones, and she had a feeling the Council was far more dangerous than a blizzard. The double doors to the council chamber were 20 feet high, carved from ancient oak, and terrifying. Sienna stood before them, flanked by 2 of Gabriel's elite guards. She wore a simple black dress the staff had found for her, but she felt like she was wearing a target. "The council is ready for you, Ms. Mercer," the guard muttered. The doors groaned open. The chamber was a semicircle of tiered seating. 12 men and women sat in high-backed chairs looking down at her. They were the elders of the 7 regions, the most powerful wolves in the kingdom, second only to the king. And in the center of the floor, kneeling in shackles, were Liam Carter and Beatrice Vaughan. Sienna's breath hitched. Gabriel hadn't just summoned the council, he had dragged her past into the light. Sienna Mercer, the head elder. A woman with steel-grey hair named Councillor Vance spoke. Her voice echoed in the vast room. "You stand accused of harboring the king's enemies' espionage and trespassing in the royal stronghold. You are an unsanctioned Omega with no wolf. Explain your presence." Sienna stepped forward. Her legs shook, but she remembered the cave. She remembered staring down a dying Alpha. These were just people in chairs. "I didn't harbor enemies," Sienna said, her voice trembling but gaining strength. "I saved the king, and I didn't trespass. He brought me here. A king does not bring a stray dog into his palace unless she is a pet." Beatrice spat from her kneeling position. Her face was bruised, her perfect hair matted. "Tell them the truth, Sienna. You're a defect, a waste of resources." "Silence!" A voice boomed from the shadows behind the high throne. Gabriel stepped into the light. He wore his formal military dress, black with gold aiguillettes and the crown of the North. The pressure in the room dropped instantly. The elders bowed their heads. "This woman," Gabriel said, walking down the steps to stand beside Sienna, "is not a pet. She is the reason the 7 regions still have a king." He turned to Elias the doctor, who was standing nervously by a projector screen. "Report, Doctor." Elias cleared his throat. "Councillors, when Ms. Mercer arrived, I ran a standard toxicity panel because she had been handling aconite in the cave. What I found was impossible." He clicked a button. A graph appeared on the screen. It showed blood toxicity levels that should be fatal. "Ms. Mercer has a concentration of wolfsbane and silver ash in her blood that would kill a grown Alpha in 10 minutes. Elias said, his voice hushed. "But she isn't dead. In fact, her body has metabolized it." The council murmured. Liam looked up, confused. "What are you talking about? She's just weak." "She isn't weak, you fool," Gabriel growled, turning on Liam. "She's immune, because she's been poisoned every day of her life." Sienna froze. "What?" Gabriel turned to her, his eyes soft, but filled with a terrible rage on her behalf. "Elias found traces of the poison in your hair follicles going back 15 years. Someone in your pack Someone close to you has been slipping suppressants into your food since you were a child. That is why you never shifted. That is why you have no scent. Your wolf isn't dead, Sienna. She's been in a coma fighting off poison for a decade. Sienna reeled back. My stepmother. She always made my tea, every morning. Beatrice's mother, Gabriel confirmed, cold as ice. The room erupted. Beatrice went pale. It was a political move, Gabriel shouted over the noise. The Mercer bloodline is strong. If Sienna had shifted, she would have been a formidable alpha female. Beatrice's family couldn't risk her challenging Beatrice for Liam's mate bond, so they poisoned her to make her an Omega. Liam looked at Beatrice, horror dawning on his face. You knew you made her weak. You made me reject her because of a lie. I did it for us, Beatrice shrieked. She was nothing. She was in the way. You made me banish my fated mate. Liam roared, straining against his chains. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The pull he had felt, the bond he had severed, it wasn't a mistake. It was stolen from him. She is not your mate, Gabriel said. His voice was low, dangerous, and final. You rejected her. The bond is broken. Gabriel turned to Sienna. He took her hands. The antidote Elias gave you this morning. It's clearing the toxin. Do you feel it? Sienna gasped. She did feel it. It started as a heat in her belly, hotter than the cave, hotter than the fire. It was a vibration in her bones, a heartbeat that wasn't hers. I'm here, a voice whispered in her mind. It was primal. It was fierce. Let her out, Gabriel whispered. Sienna threw her head back and screamed, but it wasn't a scream of pain. It was a scream of release. Her bones cracked and reshaped, the sound echoing off the stone walls. Fur burst from her skin. It wasn't the grey or brown fur of a common wolf. It wasn't even black like Gabriel's. It was white. Pure, blinding snow white. A gasp went through the council. A white wolf, Councillor Vance whispered, standing up. The legend, the moon goddess's avatar. Sienna the White Wolf shook her massive fur. She stood nearly as tall as Gabriel. She turned her golden eyes toward Liam and Beatrice. She growled a sound that made the stained glass windows rattle. Liam stared up at the magnificent beast he had thrown into the snow. Tears streamed down his face. Sienna, what have I done? The White Wolf didn't answer. She turned away from him. He was the past. He was small. She looked at Gabriel. The Black Wolf King shifted. His clothes shredded as the massive black beast emerged. The two wolves circled each other in the center of the chamber. Black and white, yin and yang, night and day. The Black Wolf bowed his head, exposing his throat to the White Wolf. It was the ultimate sign of submission. The king was submitting to the Omega. Sienna's wolf licked his muzzle gently. Then she threw her head back and howled. Gabriel joined her. The sound was a song of victory, of vengeance, and of a love that had survived the impossible. 3 days later, the coronation took place. Sienna stood on the balcony of the Sterling estate. She wore a gown of silver silk, and on her head sat a crown of white gold and diamonds. Liam and Beatrice had been stripped of their ranks and banished to the outlands, the same frozen wasteland they had sent Sienna to. The irony was a punishment worse than death. Onyx Ridge was now under the direct supervision of the Crown. Thinking about them, Gabriel wrapped his arms around her waist from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. He felt warm, solid, and permanently hers. No. Sienna smiled, leaning into him. I'm thinking about the cave. The cave, Gabriel laughed. That smelly, freezing hole. That hole saved my life, she said, turning in his arms to face him. If I hadn't been banished, I never would have found you. I never would have known how strong I was. Gabriel kissed her forehead. You were never weak, my queen. You were just waiting for a storm big enough to handle you. Sienna looked out over the kingdom, her kingdom. She had been a reject, an Omega, a girl with no wolf. Now she was the white Luna, and the king of the world was at her feet. Ready to go inside? Gabriel asked, his eyes darkening with promises. Sienna smiled, her golden eyes flashing. I'm just getting started. She took the king's hand and led him back into the light. And that is how a rejected Omega brought the Alpha King to his knees. Sienna didn't just survive the winter. She became the storm that rearranged the entire world. Liam Carter spent the rest of his life howling at a moon that would never answer him again, while Sienna and Gabriel ruled the 7 regions with a bond forged in blood and snow. What do you think? Did Liam deserve a second chance, or was his banishment exactly what he earned? And if you were, Sienna, would you have saved the wolves in the cave, or run for your life? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of revenge, romance, and redemption, please smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story. We upload brand new